Anyway, we must turn our attention to the papers. Joined this morning by Portia Berry-Kilby, who is from Young Voices UK. Portia, good morning to you.
Good morning, James. How are you?
Yeah, really well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Talk Radio. Now, before we get to the stories that you've picked out for us, funnily enough, we've got a lot of work to do to pick through the front pages. So we start with the Daily Telegraph. Number 10, police questioned by Gray over parties, officers' accounts of comings and goings in Downing Street. We'll talk about that story with you in just a few moments' time. Also, pressure on Chief Whip as ministers call for inquiry into the Ghani row. Many other things on the front page of the Telegraph. It's a veritable feast of nothing today. The Sun leads on Katie Price and whether they're called a troubled Katie Price was last night facing up to 5 years in jail over an alleged abusive text. You would have thought, given all the other things that she seems to have avoided jail about, that this is, just another. But there we are. Speculation, purely on the front. Do you care about Katie Price or not really very much?
Not massively, I'm afraid, James. No. Always amazed when it makes front page headlines.
Yeah, no, I'm always amazed that she seems to manage that. But there we go. But everybody seems to know who she is, so there we are. Daily Star. In a shock surprise to absolutely no one, hey, Dave, I just saw a spaceship hick. A quarter of all UFO sightings in the UK happen outside the pub. Do you think this is because the Daily Star thinks it's a slow news day?
Well, surprisingly, Russia doesn't make the front pages at all. So there seems to be more pressing than that. And it's not exactly surprising that 50% of people are slightly inebriated when they see a flying object in the sky.
Well, quite. Ukraine on the brink is, though, on the front page of today's newspaper, but also a week of reckoning for Boris Johnson, Prime Minister, under pressure to launch new inquiry into Islamophobia claims. Meanwhile, The Guardian, I'm more interested by the back page of The Guardian than I am the front. The front has the New Zealand delay to the... Jacinda Ardern has put New Zealand on a red setting to curb Omicron cases, and she's postponed her wedding. Whatever, nobody cares. Meanwhile, PM pulled into row over Tory party Islamophobia is the front page. More interesting, though, on the back page, though, Portia, is that they've got an advert for Disney Plus. They're talking about some of the new releases that they've got coming to thing, which I think is quite exciting. Yeah,
that should be front page. Absolutely.
And must be. I mean, other streaming services are available, and the problem is which one do you have? Which ones are you supposed to have? Do you have all of them? And indeed, have you got yourself the Talk Radio TV app yet? Which, of course, is different from the one I mentioned just there, because ours is free to download, and then you can watch whatever you like on Talk Radio TV, which is all excitement. Daily Mail, entire cabinet would back a tax hike delay. We'll talk about that story in a minute. The Daily Mirror says freezing. A gran of 71, his house is too cold for grandkids to visit. The Metro talks about fight to the death, though. They say invasion in Ukraine will spark a bloodbath. Unilever is under pressure in the Financial Times for they've got a new US activist building a stake in the company. They clearly don't like the direction of travel there. The Times leads on fears mount Russia will weaponise gas supplies, warning of UK bills being at record levels if Ukraine is invaded. And Johnson still believes he broke no rules. We'll talk about that in a sec. And Daily Express, Boris accepts need for change at number 10. So a veritable feast there. It seems to be focusing a little bit on Ukraine, a lot on Boris Johnson, and a very difficult week ahead. So, Portia, let's turn our attention to Boris. He's on the front page of the Times newspaper, but as I said, on pretty much everyone. He still believes that he broke no lockdown rules at a Downing Street event. If technically Sue Gray comes out and says, well, he and they didn't, is he in the clear?
I think it's a good line of argument for him to say he didn't know what was going on. He's pleading ignorance. He thought it was a farewell, or he thought it was a business meeting. If he sticks that line of argument and the MPs rally around him and there's nothing more damning come out than already, then maybe he's rode it through. There's no one really positioning themselves to take over right now. And I think a bit more steadiness, see us through May, seems the plan of action for Boris and his pals.
You say steadiness and perhaps they'll be able to ride this out. But I guess part of the problem here is that no matter whatever the conclusion of that Downing Street investigation is, whether it was the rule of law that he broke or the spirit of law that he broke, it's one of them.
Absolutely. And I think part of it, he has to say that the culture needs to change, which is what he has been saying. And although it's parties that he wasn't at, they were going under his roof, and there needs to be a clamp down on kind of embodying the spirit of the rule from all levels. So that's something that he has to push and say that he is going to do, and is contrite that wasn't happening back in lockdown.
Right. Now, before we get to your next story from the papers, we have some work to do, so we'll fasten our seatbelts for what can only be described as today's uplifting news story of the day. So I'm not going to talk about Eddie the Eagle, nor am I going to say after 55 years, first ever Brit wins Alpine World Cup team ski glee. This is the skier Dave Riding has won Britain's first gold medal in the 55 years of the Alpine World Cup. It's quite amazing. He's 35. He has won this incredible downhill victory. But I'm not going to talk about that because this is an even more important and exciting story in today's Sun newspaper. We rescue telly legends, says the Sun. Saved in the mick of time is the headline. Children's TV robot Metal Mickey has been saved from the scrap heap by the Sun. The 1980s favourite had been left to rust after creator Johnny Edward died last year, and a pal he left the machine to also passed away. We found Johnny's will and, along with the executor, got into his flat in Hackney in East London. After battling through locks, we spotted a 5-foot Metal Mickey in a recording studio, along with pin badges, lunchboxes, and a never-seen-before set of original designs of a robot. We put him on a van and delivered him to the Sun's offices, where he will now stay. I'm tempted to go down there now and go and try and find him. We're all going to go and try and find Metal Mickey. He's in this building. I mean, he's in the building. Oh,
I'm
that's
on
exciting.
the edge of my seat, James.
Do you even know who Metal Mickey is?
I can't say I do.
Unbelievable.
Before my time.
I've never been this old. I mean, I'm quite excited by this story, but I mean, clearly you could care less. I made all that effort to find an uplifting story. I mean, you put on a fake smile and you're just like, yeah, whatever. When he's finished, then I can get on with my other stuff. Unbelievable. Portia, we'll come back to some more stories that you picked out from the papers in just a few moments' time. Meanwhile, you are listening to The Early Breakfast on Talk Radio with me, James Mann. Meanwhile, let's get back to the papers. Portia Berry-Kilby is with me now. Let's talk about the entire cabinet. They were back a tax hike delay.
Yes, so this comes after Jacob Rees-Mogg was rumoured to have backed a delay to the increase in national insurance, and apparently no one else in cabinet would oppose it should it be suggested, which is somewhat of a negative framing. But we have Rishi Sunak supposedly calling it the Prime Minister's tax, which shows he wants to distance himself from it, and a general increasing awareness that to increase national insurance at the same time as hiked energy prices and cost of living would not be a good move for the already struggling Prime Minister.
And I suppose this is one of the big things that I've talked about consistently on this programme, which I'm really surprised that Rishi Sunak has not done much about, which is our tax system is too complicated. It appears to be taxing people in a very harsh way, particularly in an environment where the economy is, it's under pressure as a result of 2 years of COVID. We've got inflation pressures, which central bankers keep saying, oh, it's only temporary. No, it's not. All you have to do is look at the prices in the shops, the pressure on wages, various other things. And then, of course, energy bills. The tax system is the one place that the government can make an effort to, whether it's level up or sort out, and they seem to have done nothing.
That's somewhat true, yes, which is a shame. And of course, the reasoning coming from the Treasury is that they need to pay off the debt accrued for COVID and that the time is now. But there's a lot to be said for fully see COVID out and don't make people pay it back when they're still struggling to recover from the cost of it, and give them a bit of breathing space so that they're in a stronger position.
How much of a mess is this latest story? So this is in the Eye, but it's in many of the other papers, which is the story about Nusrat Ghani. Tory pressure mounting on Boris Johnson for an inquiry into the ex-minister's Islamophobia claims. Another damaging claim against the Prime Minister. How many more of these can he have before it almost doesn't matter what the results of various inquiries or comments are? It just becomes one too many.
Well, exactly. And what's interesting about this story is the timing, because at the time when all of the MPs the Conservative MPs should be rallying around the Prime Minister. They're not. So it looks as though there's deeper division being spread at the time when, with Stu Gray's report coming out, you need everyone to be with a one voice, shall we say, not another scandal or another story that's damaging the PM, who apparently rinsed his hands of the matter, albeit suggested it was sent to the proper routes for investigation. But not a good time for this to land.
Kind of interesting as we talk about COVID vaccine passports, and indeed Philip's got very cross with me. He's just said, if you carry referring to people who have reservations to an experimental injection as anti-vaxxers, there could well be a repeat of previous hammerings that you received. I mean, if people are hesitant, I've always said if it's down to an individual to choose whether or not they want to have the vaccine, I think to describe it as an experimental injection, or indeed to be that COVID vaccine skeptic, is, I don't know. I think we've all moved on from that. But then on the other hand, COVID vaccine passports in time for half-term holidays. I mean, do we really need to have children updated in this way?
I definitely don't think so myself. And it just shows that vaccine passports are here to stay. If you have younger people also needing it, and granted it's places like France or Italy who require it as grounds for entry into the country, then you can see why the government is rolling it out. But
do you have any
wrong signal?
Do you have any objection to vaccine passports for international travel?
I think there's a stronger case to be made that when it's been proven that you can be boosted and also catch COVID, spread COVID, it seems a bit silly. The COVID is in those countries. Flying into the country with COVID isn't really going to impact, say, France at all. Maybe it will on the plane if it spreads to the 200 bodies there, but not, it won't change the state of play in the country.
And I suppose this is the point, isn't it? Which is, if the benefit, if you like, of having a passport or a COVID passport is to only the individuals, then at what stage do we allow that imposition? I mean, you can still travel without having had the vaccines. It's very difficult. And you've got to provide more paperwork and various other things. That having been said, I think there is a distinct concern that we've just kind of rolled over and just accepted that these things are just there. Having said that, if another country imposes a rule or says you must have your vaccines, if you want to travel that country, well, them's the rules.
Yes, and it makes sense that the government is matching those rules to help people, to facilitate those rules if people want to go abroad. It would be more alarming if our government were introducing the same measures for entry into the UK. It is also quite disappointing, I suppose, that the UK isn't doing more to push back against these measures and pointing out the somewhat double standards or the hypocrisy when you can still spread COVID. Regardless.
Now, let's talk about the UK's biggest cities. They've lost nearly a year of sales due to COVID-related downturn. I mean, can this ever recover? Can this ever come back?
Well, it seems that the government, rather than levelling up, is facing a levelling down situation, because the poorer cities have kind of delayed the inevitable downfall of the high streets due to injections of cash from the government, but at the same time the richer cities are suffering as well. So they have to kind of level the whole country up to a higher state rather than just a few target areas that it was before.
And we talk about levelling up, we talk about the Prime Minister, various other things. I mean, he is going to be in the news probably all week as a result of these various things. There are some suggesting that he might not survive the week. What's your take on it?
I think he'll survive the week and a little bit longer. There's not the time for a leadership election, and a lot of these things, if it was COVID, it wasn't Boris's fault. It was an unparalleled situation. And if it really is just a culture of excessive partying in number 10, it's a bit disproportionate to call for the PM to resign.
It is, but then on the other hand, if he's the person in charge and setting the rules, how on earth can you set those rules and then not think that you have to take responsibility if your team decide to break them?
Well, that's very true, but at the end of the day, he's not a nanny, and the people, there's a policeman outside number 10, what were they doing? Surely they know what's going on, and it's to the, not the lawmakers to enforce the laws.
Yeah, but you say he's not a nanny, but then what about if he's there. I mean, there are pictures of him attending these events, or they're work events. There might be work events, but then on the other hand, I can't think of any other company that was having any work event that was anything other than work. There were no drinks going on. There were no gatherings. There were no socially distanced drinks. I mean, this interpretation of the rules is quite extraordinary.
It is a very loose interpretation. It's a very politician's answer to say he didn't know what was going on and it was a business meeting with alcohol. Can he stick to that line? It seems he will. I don't think that really satisfies the public, so there needs to be a cultural change. But there's only so much trudging through what's happened that can be done for the time being. I think people want to see a change. Is Boris Johnson's head really going to be enough on its own?
Well, I suppose we're going to see a lot of different comments coming through. Portia, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. If people want to find out more about you or Young Voices, where do they go?
They'll search Young Voices on Twitter or follow me, Portia BK on Twitter, and there'll be links to Young Voices on that.
There we go. Portia BK on Twitter. Portia Berry-Kilby, political commentator with Young Voices UK. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Talk Radio. It's much appreciated for going through the papers. I'm sure we'll speak to you again very soon.